Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining today. I'm super excited for this class. I was just looking at the comments. I see a few folks here from New England, Pennsylvania. Well, welcome. Thanks for coming today. I'm doing a super easy project. This is great for beginners. If you're brand new to sewing, anyone can do this. It also gives you a little bit of an insight to doing buttons. So this is an upcycling project. You can use brand new tea towels or towels if you want, but I love to do this project and use old towels, old beach towels, bath towels, whatever it be, to add some flair to your kitchen. So I don't know if you guys are like me, but whenever I dry off my hands in the kitchen and I put my tea towels, my hand towels around my stove, they always just fall off, and continuously throughout cooking or whatever, I'm constantly putting them back. So this allows you to have a towel on your stove or even in your bathroom on the little hanging hook, but you can latch it on so it stays put. And I have so many of these and I wash them all the time. They're super easy to make. And I actually love this project because my mom, she usually makes these, she makes these all the time for Christmas and gives them away to friends and family. So it's a really easy project for gifts, things like that. And this pattern is something that my mom just drew up and gave to me when I actually first started learning how to sew. So it's a very easy beginner project. So to kind of get started, look back here to this camera. Actually, well, I don't have an overhead camera today, so I'm going to kind of do some front facing things. So the first thing we're going to do is actually take your fabric and cut the pieces to size. So you're going to cut two pieces. Now, attached with a pamphlet right up for this class, there is a pattern piece and it looks just like this. But honestly, if you didn't have a pattern piece, you could draw one up yourself. They're pretty easy and you can make the sizes. Like if you wanted to make a wider one or a smaller one for different types of tea towels, you could totally make it how you want. But the generic look of it is basically this: to have a fold over, to have your button. So you'll need to cut out two pieces. So I have two pieces here cut up. Now, I don't know if you noticed this cute little apron. I recently made this apron and I thought it'd be fun to kind of use some matching purple fabric to have a theme with my kitchen, you know, match my kitchen towel holders. So starting off, what you're going to do first, once you cut out your two pieces to size, just like this, you're actually just going to take one piece. And Patty, I see your comment. So if you go to this class, it comes with a write-up and an attachment for how to do the project later on. If you go back to do it after the class, attached with the write-up should be a PDF with the simple printout of this pattern. And it honestly looks just like this because I just copied this right into the scanner. So you'll take one piece first, and what we're going to do first is add our button. And the reason I do that is because I like, once we sew around the two sides together, I like to already have the button on, because later it might be a little hard to get in the space you need if you were to do it with them already sewn together. So, and if anyone here is not familiar with sewing on a button, I'm going to kind of walk you through it. I'm using the heavy duty 6700C today. This is a great computerized machine, super easy for one-step buttonhole. But if you have questions about doing a four-step buttonhole or more insight into how buttonholes work, me and Sonny actually did a Michael's class. I think it was maybe like a month ago or so, where we kind of really walked you through the different types of buttonholes and all of that. And it was called Bobbins, Bird's Nests, Buttonholes, and Beyond, and that is on YouTube also. So if you were to go back to the past Michael's classes, you could watch that to learn more about different types of buttons. So I'm going to flip my camera over to the machine here to start off. So you want to make sure before you sew on your button, you're going to mark about 2 inches up from the bottom here. Now, I'm going to kind of just eyeball it, but if you have a ruler or whatever, but you could use chalk and make a mark, but that's basically like right about here is where we're going to sew the button. You want to make sure there's a good amount of space, because later on we're going to have this pressed under, and you want to make sure you still have space to sew below the button later on. So starting out, when you're sewing on a button, the first thing you want to do is put on your sew on button foot. So it looks just like this. It's a clear and blue plastic little foot, and you'll notice it has these little prongs, and these prongs are what goes in the front and actually sits on top of the button And that way you don't have to hand stitch a button. You can use your machine. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through that. But the first thing actually I'm going to put on the foot, but another thing you're going to need to do is so the fabric doesn't move is we're going to lower our feed dogs. So the feed dogs are these little grooved metal things under the presser foot. And so to remove them, different machines are different. So this machine actually has a lever that I'm going to push over and it's going to lower make feed dogs. And I'm going to zoom in just a tad bit. It might be hard to see because of the level of this camera, but in the back here, there's a little switch. And I don't know if you guys pay close attention, you might notice, see how they just disappeared? They popped down. So now the feed dogs are out of the way. So I'm in a good spot to now sew on my button because if those feed dogs were up, the fabric would move forward and back. And you don't want that to happen because then your button's going to get all out of place. So once they're lowered, and so if you have a machine that has a, way. That does have a lever to lower your feed dogs, you probably have a thing that's called a darning plate. And what a darning plate is, it's a little screen that you actually use to cover the feed dogs so that way it also doesn't move. So just depending on the type of your machine, you might have to cover your feed dogs instead of lower them. So I'm gonna put on my sew on button foot. You wanna make sure the blue prongs are facing forward. You're just gonna snap your button foot into place. Now, like I said, I'm gonna eyeball this. It's not the best advice, but I'm using a little 2-hole button today. You could also sew on your button with 4 holes. The method I'm gonna show you is you could do the same thing if you had a 4-hole button. So I'm gonna first place my fabric right underneath the buttonhole foot, kind of where I want it. So I actually, you know what, I do have measuring tape right there, I just realized. So I'm gonna kind of make sure I'm about 2 inches up from my bottom. So like right about there is perfect. And then you wanna make sure it's centered. So I'm gonna take my button now and I'm gonna place it directly underneath my sew on button foot. And what you're going to do first, before you hit your foot pedal, anything like that, you want to now put your machine into a zigzag stitch. And you're going to do this because you want to make sure it's going to zigzag back and forth in the hole. So I'm going to go over to my settings here and I'm just using my regular, this computerized machine has several stitches. So I'm on my main screen right now and I can actually get to a zigzag stitch right here by pressing 5. And most buttons are all standard to the same distance apart for the holes. But just in case, we're going to double check. So before we actually start sewing and press the foot pedal, you're going to take your hand wheel and first see, you kind of line up your button underneath the presser foot. And I'm going to turn my hand wheel manually towards me. And if you notice like, oops, I'm touching the button and you don't want that to happen, you want your needle to break. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep manually turning my hand wheel and adjusting the button until I get it in a spot. You'll see now, I'm going to zoom in just a tad bit more. Now it's going down. You test it once in the first hole and again in the second hole. I'm going to go just a couple times and I can tell now, okay, I'm secure. I'm going to go in between both holes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my foot pedal and I'm just going to go a couple times to get it nice and secure. So you'll see that's pretty good right there. And now I just sewed on a button. How easy was that? So I'm gonna actually I'm gonna just go one. This will be safe. Then I'm gonna raise my presser foot and take out my button, and I'm gonna thread. So now you can see here, beautiful. Sewed on a button, super easy, just like that. You didn't have to use a needle, anything like that. So, when we're going to come back to sewing the actual button hole in a later step. So now what I'm going to show you. So that was super easy. First part of this project done. The next thing we're going to do is you're going to take your other side of your towel holder, and we're going to sew it together with the good sides facing. Now this fabric doesn't really have a good side, bad side. They're the same, so I don't really have to worry about that. But if it was, you would want to make sure the 2 good sides would be touching. So I'm going to put them together just like this. The button's now going to be inside in the middle. And I'm going to use some sewing clips here and just clip it up really quick so I have it, nice and secure. You don't need to go crazy. You don't need to have like 100 clips, but just that way it doesn't kind of slide around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew around this towel holder at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Come back to this camera. I'm going to zoom out some. So now you're going to sew all the way around this towel holder. You might have to pivot just a slight bit around these curves at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Just make sure you don't sew the bottom part. We're leaving that open because later that's where we're going to insert our towel. So I'm going to go back to a regular straight stitch, and you want to take off your oppressor, your buttonhole foot. And so you want to make sure also to remember to raise your feed dog. So I'm going to go back to my lever in the back. I'm going to turn my feed dogs back on, and you might not notice, but they didn't actually come up. And a lot of times when people start sewing, they freak out and they're like, oh my gosh, my feed dogs are broken. Why didn't they come back up? So this actually is normal. This is supposed to happen. So once you turn that lever, what you do is you take your hand dial and turn your wheel once towards you, and then your feed dogs get kind of back into their spot. So you just want to make sure, don't panic if you think your feed dogs are stuck in the down position. All you need to do is turn that hand wheel once around to get them back. So now I'm going to put back on my regular standard presser foot to just sew around. And for this part, we're just going to be using a regular straight stitch. So I'm just going to go back to 1. My needle is in the middle position. So now I'm just going to start on one of the sides of the edge and sew around about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So, and do a back stitch at the beginning and the end. And I didn't do embroidery with this project, but another thing, like yesterday, I was actually embroidering some towels for a different project. And I was thinking how, if you had an embroidery machine, this also would be a great way to add a gift. You can make these little kitchen towels for your friends or family that you could, monogram, put names on, or just things that cater to your kitchen. So I think that's kind of a fun idea if you're into embroidery. This is a really easy way to step up your hand towels. And we all love an upcycling project. As you can see, as I go around these curves, I'm just kind of going a little bit slower. And when I get here, I'm just going to pivot a little bit so I can go around that curve. And when I get to my end, I do one more back stitch. Okay.
So Carly, while you're finishing and you're turning that, Patty said that the embroidery class would be great to have do something with. So we'll have to do embroidery, and Patty, you'll have to keep an eye out for that class.
Yes, I definitely am planning an upcoming class. It will TBD what it'll be, but I will be doing something embroidering on towel. So keep an eye out for that. But so once you're done, super easy. You can see how fast that was. You just flip this around just like this, and then you can, work the edges and press it. Now, I don't have my iron over here, so later when we get to the actual one I'm going to sew together, I have another one that I already kind of pressed, but just to kind of give you an idea. So once you would get this all pushed out, you would go ahead and press the seams also. And then we're going to set this aside right now because we're going to, we can do the buttonhole in we could do it now, but also I'm going to show you how to serge. So is anyone in this class familiar with sergers? Have you used a serger? No.
No.
Well, they will change your life. I'm obsessed with my serger. And so basically how a serger works, and I honestly, okay, yes, I do have one. I don't even know if I showed you guys the full. So for instance, the towel that you cut up, depending on what part of the towel and where you're cutting it up, this was obviously a full-size beach towel. But the one thing about towels is once you cut the raw edge, and they're gonna fray like crazy, and they're gonna, actually, here's one that I am gonna use, and you'll notice it kind of, it's not, it frays, the fabric comes off, and you don't want that. Over time when you wash it and you dry your hands, this edge here is going to kind of come apart. So what a serger does is it finishes that edge to prevent that from happening. So if you didn't have a serger, you could use a stretch stitch or like a zigzag stitch, kind of like an overcast stitch along the side edge, and then fold it over with and press it, and then sew it as a hem. And even today, like, so I'm going to show you how to serge the edges. And you could even, once you get the edge serged, you could still fold it and then sew over the serged edge. Because I'm going to use some purple thread and I wanted to kind of have that thread showing, I'm just going to leave the serged edge visible, but that's up to you if you want to fold it over and then sew it. But you can see, let me go back to this camera. This is what a serged edge looks like. So it kind of finishes it and it prevents it from fraying along that edge. So now in my write-up, I kind of talked about how to cut your towel to size. So basically, here's a finished one. So you want to make sure that the towel will be the width of this base, but I like to have it, so you could do, like, if you cut a towel exactly to this width and then we're going to insert it later, you could have one towel like just like that. But I like to fold mine over so it actually is going to meet in the middle. So it's going to overlap a little bit just like this. And then we're going to insert it later and sew it in like this. So the folded part will be in the back. And I do that because I like it to be just a little thicker. You know, when you're drying your hands, you like to have a little extra, and I will like I'll rub food, everything on it. So that way you can get a little bit more use out of the towel. But if you have like a one tea towel that you want to just insert and just serge the edge into this exact width, you can do that too. I think I put the measurements for mine with the folded edge is about 16 by 16 for the towel size. But another thing you can do to play around is if you want a really long towel, like that goes to the bottom of your stove, or even a shorter one, the length is also up to you as well. And you can see here when I cut my towel, I kept these finished edge of the towel on the bottom, so I will not have to serge this bottom part. It's kind of up to you, but had I cut like the towel in the middle, I would want to serge the bottom edge as well. So if you can utilize a finished edge of the towel, you won't need to serge that as also. So, and I wanted to also show, so I've also used different types of fabric. So this was like some tea towel fabric that I thrifted that I've used before for the same thing. So lots of ways you can do these hand towels. So now I'm going to go over to the serger. And sergers, if you're not familiar, they might look a little scary. They have 4 threads, but they're fun and they're actually pretty simple to use in theory. So what I'm going to do is, and a cool thing about sergers is you can't really see here, but on the side is actually a little blade. So anything you serge will get a nice, clean, straight edge because it's going to snip off all those unevenness of your towel or your fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just serge these 2 side edges, and I don't technically have to serge the top edge of this because it's going to be tucked inside of my towel holder, the fabric part, but I'm going to go ahead and serge that as well. So I'm just going to kind of walk you guys through and kind of show you a serger being started. Now, and the cool thing about sergers is I'm going to actually start it like, usually the feed dogs are pretty strong. Here, I barely had it under my my presser foot, I mean, and it caught it and the feed dog started dragging it under. So that's another. There's so many things you can do with sergers. You can do rolled edges. It's great for stretchy fabrics. But if you notice here, well, you can't really see it, but all these little pieces are getting trimmed off. We have a nice flat fold. So all the way to the end and snip it. You can technically pivot and turn with sergers, but sometimes I like to just snip it and then start another clean edge. So you can see here this beautiful purple, straight, clean, finished edge on this towel. So now I'm gonna do the other sides. The cool thing about sergers is, normally when you're sewing, right after the fabric is on away from the needle, you kind of have to stop. But you can actually keep running it and you let this tail kind of run out and then you trim it. So I want to do this last side. And if you're into like garment sewing or interested in garment sewing, I would say a serger is kind of one of those things that you'll want to step it up and get one because the inside of your clothes will have that professional kind of finished look. So now I've serged all of the raw edges of my towel.
So Carly, before you go any further, will you just open up the front of the serger?
Yeah.
Because someone asked if it was self-threading and I said, it really wasn't self-threading, but it wasn't hard. Because there are little dots that take you through step by step and there's a little guide at the back, so.
Yeah, so it does look scary, but there's these little maps and it will step by step show you like, okay, this right thread, the yellow, it's color coded, how to get into they're called loopers, the upper looper, the lower looper, and then these two threads here on this left side go through the two needles. So there are two needles in a serger, but there are other techniques you can do where you actually use one needle. So there's a lot you can do with a serger, and getting started, there's tons of ways to learn about threading it and all of that. But basically on the inside, it looks like this. There's a lot going on. All right, so now that we have our towel serge, we're actually gonna set this aside for now. So we're gonna go back. I know I had just sewed this one together, but that was kind of a practice to show you guys. I have one that I've already pressed. So once you press it nice and flat, it's gonna look like this. This fabric's a little thicker. You can use like cotton fabrics, these are meant to be wear and tear over time. You're gonna be using them in your kitchen or your bathroom. But I use a little bit of a thicker kind of denim fabric for this one, which is a little sturdier. And you'll see here, I did press the bottom part under, like just about half an inch to an inch. You want to fold it in and then press it. And later when we insert the towel, I'll show you all that. But what we're going to do now is sew on our buttonhole. So kind of like before, there's a few other things I want to go over. But again, if you want to check out that video that Sonia and I did, we show you more about a 4-step buttonhole, which is different because today I'm showing you a 1-step buttonhole. So this is a buttonhole foot. I always confuse the two terms, button foot, buttonhole foot. So what it looks like is this, and it has a little lever here, and this will slide and basically make the size of your button. So this little gauge here, I actually inserted my button, and you can see, so say I had a larger button, you would put the button in. I'm gonna go over to this camera. And that way when we put it in the machine, it will help the machine know like, okay, this is the size of the button that we need to make. So it's a little bit of a gauge for that. Now the button I sewed on is, actually I need to make sure it's the same size. Yeah, I think it will work. So, and let me go to my machine here. So before we actually put it in, one other thing, you want to pull down this lever. And we're going to go to a buttonhole stitch. Now, this machine has an easy little access to this. It's stitch 0. So I'm going to press that and it automatically sets up my machine to have for the 1-step buttonhole. If you had a 4-step buttonhole, there'd be a couple steps in between where you basically do one side, the other side, and then the top and the bottom. But everything should be in a good setting here with this. And it also has, I don't know if you can see, but it has a little alert sign on my screen. This is why the computerized machines are great, because it kind of gives you that little insight that you might forget. There's been so many times that I start a project and I forget a little step and I didn't even look at the screen to realize it was trying to warn me. So you can't really see, but there's a little exclamation point and it shows this little lever that needs to pop down. And that is this lever here. So you want to make sure that you always put this down. And that is what's going to kind of guide your button foot. So I'm going to pop on my button foot, pop it into place. You want to make sure that the button part is in the back. And then I'm going to lower my lever. So that's going to be the thing that guides it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sewing the buttonhole near this top curved edge. And you want to make sure, one, that you don't go too far to the top, but also you don't want to go too far to the bottom. But you want to kind of gauge the size, like, okay, when I fold this over, I want to make sure my buttonhole's right in this area. But I also want to make sure that, say you put a button like in the middle, you want to make sure that this loop it's going to create is going to be big enough to clip around your stove or wherever you plan on putting this towel holder. Because I've done that before where I'm like, oh, I'll just put my button right here, and then later I barely can fit it around my stove. Or, you know, if you want to, I put some of these on my grill outside. They're great for different things. So just think about where you're going to put it. So I'm going to, I'm going to use some chalk. I think I have some, and I want to make sure. And so also another thing I want to know is sometimes your buttonhole, it might start and go backwards and it might start and go forward. So you want to keep that in mind wherever your starting point is, that it's in the right spot, depending if your button's going to go backwards first or forward. I believe mine goes backwards first, but watch me mix that up. But I'm just gonna...
So Carly, before you're back at your regular sewing machine.
Yes.
For the buttonhole, not
Yes.
the serger anymore.
This is back at my regular sewing machine. Sergers do not do buttons. They are great for finishing your edges, all of that, but they only will serge and finish your edges. The sewing machine though, yes. Buttonholes are on all sewing machines. They'll just be either a 1-step or a 4-step. And what I'm showing you today is a 1-step buttonhole. So just keep that in mind. And I'm just gonna make a little mark with my chalk here of where I want to start my buttonhole. Can't really see it, but and one other thing, almost forgot, is I'm gonna take some stabilizer. I'm using a thicker fabric today, so if I didn't have this today, it might be okay, but stabilizer is really important when sewing on buttons. It helps give it that structure. You're gonna be, especially with jackets and coats, if you're constantly opening and, closing a button, over time that thread can kind of wear out and come loose. So the stabilizer will also help give it more structure. And what I'm gonna do is I'm honestly just gonna, this is tearaway stabilizer. You might be like, why? You'll see at the end, I just tear it away and you won't even know it was there. But I'm just gonna rip off a small piece of this tearaway stabilizer that I'm gonna put behind my fabric as I sew on the button. So I'm going to line it up kind of where I started my point right here. And all you're gonna do is, now that I have it on my button setting, I'm gonna press my foot pedal and it should just start making the exact buttonhole size that I need, because I put in that button in the back to kind of gauge the size. And you can tell now it just stopped at that point. That was the back point, and now it's going forward again. And now it's doubling up. It's doing the left side first, and then it's gonna move over and do the right side. So this is kind of nice. You can just kind of sit back and keep an eye on it. And it will stop automatically when it's done. Super easy. Okay, then I'm gonna raise up my lever, pop it out, and look at that. So easy. so fast. So I'm just gonna trim these loose threads. And this is where I was saying, so you'll see on the back, there's a stabilizer. All you do is tear it away. And now it just has that extra reinforcing stabilizer underneath that thread. So I'm gonna trim these. And then to open up your buttonhole, what I'm gonna show you is, so I first like to take some sewing pins and put them at the top and bottom edge of the buttonhole. And this is because I can't tell you the amount of times that I have tried to open up a buttonhole and I didn't do this and I was just being careless, and then I actually ripped the top edge of my buttonhole. So this just kind of acts as a little shield to protect those edges. So once you get them in place, just like that, I'm gonna take a seam ripper. Actually, I might actually use my little scissors first, and I kind of like fold it some and I get a little hole started to kind of snip it in the middle. And this is a thicker fabric, so it's a little trickier, but and you can kind of use those scissors to snip open your button hole. And then I'm gonna use a seam ripper as well. And that's why I was saying, if you were to just use a seam ripper and say you were ripping at the hole and then you accidentally went too far and ripped at this pin, you can see it stopping me. So I'm just gonna make sure it's open all the way. And there we have it. So now our buttonhole is ready to go. And I don't know if anyone here has been to my other classes, but I always have to show off my pin hedgehog. I need to name him. All right. So that was super easy. I don't know, like this, what time is it? It's 12:32. Basically, I was done with this whole project. So now, before we actually sew in the towel piece, what we're gonna do is, I like to add a little bit of a reinforcement like stitch to the top edge of my towel. And again, as I mentioned, if you don't like the serge edge on the outside, how mine is, which it will be tucked in the back, you could simply first take your iron, press this over, and then just sew along to make a little hem. So that way it's not like visible on the outside. But what I'm gonna do is I am going to, it's gonna be a little tricky with my camera angle. I'm gonna zoom out. Okay. Oh, okay, so I'm gonna show you right here on this table. So I'm gonna double check to make sure my width of when I'm gonna insert it is how I want it. But I'm gonna match these up in the middle. So I'm gonna fold it in half like that. And I'm gonna take my piece that's finished, and you can see like, oops, it's still a little too wide. And I'm gonna be sewing through a little bit of extra thickness here. So right about here, this is the width that I need. So I'm gonna kind of clip it just to secure that. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just sew a quick little stitch on the top, near the top edge, because you don't want to see it later on when you insert it. But that way it will just secure this in place for when we insert it in the next step, because sometimes you'll sew it together when it's inserted and this little guy will kind of slide out. So this way it'll just be a little bit of a reinforcing stitch. So let me get mine. I'm gonna go back to my regular straight stitch. And because I am sewing through a little thickness of this towel here, I'm just gonna bump my stitch length up a little bit to like 3.5, just to be extra safe. And I'm gonna take off my buttonhole foot. And this is every person's dilemma. I moved my presser foot somewhere. Okay, there it is. I feel like everything always escapes from me. I'll be using like scissors, and then the next second, you know, they ran away. So, okay. You zoom in again. All right. So what we're gonna do is just add that quick little reinforcing stitch on the top. You won't see this, it's only there to kind of help secure it in place. So starting on one side, we'll forward back stitch. And I was actually telling Sonny for this class, so I've made so many of these towel holders. I literally like one Christmas, I was super broke and I think I made like 30 of them for my friends. But I actually, if you ever go to like sporting games and you get those free towels, at like on the chair when you get there, and after the game, you usually like throw those away. But I think I used some of those as well to make these little hand towels that, were for my city's team. So it's another fun upcycle. But now this is nice and secure. So now basically the last step of this whole project is to just insert it. So you're gonna want to use some pins probably for this part or clips, but what you're gonna do is, and you want to make sure you have enough space. That's why I said at least 2 inches for your button up, because obviously I pressed it under a little bit. So if I was showing you with this piece, before you were to insert it, you want to make sure you fold this under about 1/2 inch to 1 inch like this, and then give it a good press. And then that's how I got it to look like this. So that way it'll be a nice clean edge. So now I'm going to insert the towel just inside here a little bit. Get it in there. Just like that. And so then I'm going to actually use 2 clips on the side edge to hold it, but then in the middle, I'm going to add maybe like 1 or 2 pins to also secure it. So,
And Carly, Amy said, great idea for the promotional items, but also might be good for do a smaller version for the car, which is a
Ooh,
great idea.
yeah. Yeah, my car, oh my gosh, I need to come up with some solutions. That's a great idea. I always have like random stuff in my car, and then whenever I need a napkin, I can never find one. You get like fast food and you're like, why aren't there any napkins in my glove box? I'm gonna have one of these now. Okay. Just like that. So again, I'm gonna actually, my stitch length at 3.5 should be good, but I'm gonna bump it up just to like 4, just to be safe, because remember I am sewing through 2 layers of towel as well as this denim fabric that's a little thicker. So I'm gonna,
And Patty suggested for golf bags too, so
Ooh.
lots of good ideas
Yeah.
here, Carly.
I'm gonna have to tell my mom that everyone loves her towel holders. So I'm gonna sew close to the bottom edge. You want to just make sure that however far you tucked in the towel, that it's enough to sew it through. Because sometimes I've tucked it in right on the edge and then I didn't actually catch it. So just tuck it in at least 1 inch, 2 inches. You can see mine here is tucked in all the way up to there. So I'm just gonna start on one edge, do a little forward back stitch, and then sew it across. And I am a little close to my button. We'll see. Hopefully I don't. I'm actually gonna. Gosh. I take that back. Make sure you watch your button and where it is so that you have the proper space. I made it. I was a little close, but. All right. And then I'm gonna do on the back stitch at the end to really secure it. And then take it on out. And I use a contrasting thread. You can tell on the back it didn't look super straight, but and then just snip all your loose threads. And then at the end, that is your towel holder. And so then let me test out my button, make sure I will say the button I had on my actual button foot was maybe a tad smaller, but I think it will. There we go. Super easy. So this would go around your stove or your bathroom holder. Great beginner project. You can just see I did that literally in 40 minutes. Even if you serged and then hemmed the sides, it would still be a 1-hour project guaranteed. So I hope some of you guys make this. It's super easy. And does anyone have questions or anything?
We haven't had any questions, Carly, but people were just coming up with good ideas on how to use it, and Monet got the pattern in the chat, so.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys all coming today. Sani is going to be teaching. I don't know if anyone was here last time. We were supposed to have this class and it kind of got rescheduled, but Sani is going to be teaching how to do some greeting cards. You can sew and make greeting cards. It's just super easy, like unique project using Stitch programming. So that's going to be on May 29th if you're interested in coming to that. We'll love to see you guys again, but
There is one question from Amy. Could you review the hem on the top part again? So
as far as like the fold over,
I think just the fold over, yeah.
so right now you can see, right, see it has a raw edge. So what you would do is when you're at the iron, you would just fold it under. I would say about 1/2 inch to 1 inch, just dependent, making sure you have enough space still under the button. And with your iron, then you would go ahead and press this nice and flat, and then it will stay. And then that's when I went ahead after I pressed that and was able to insert it. Yep. Velcro. You could use Velcro. I've actually used Velcro. The only thing is you want to make sure, one, I used a Velcro in time that got my needle all sticky. So it's kind of, you want to make sure you don't have the kind that doesn't have the stickiness on it. And then also really reinforce it, because one time I did make these with Velcro, and over time, the constant like taking on and off of my stove, the Velcro like slowly ripped off. So, but that would work also. But all right, well, thanks everyone for coming today. That's a wrap.